It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, talking your real estate news, of course, 7 days a week, and as heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Weekend back again. Yes, a Saturday full of real estate around Australia, and the last day for August, the 31st today. And good morning to Tracy and Damon in Croydon in Melbourne. You emailed through to say that your property journey for getting into your first property is going to take you to Perth. You both run online businesses, you say, from home, and the move, you say, not only represents better buying, which you hope to buy a house as you're looking at starting a family, but also many of your friends have moved to Perth over the last 3 years. Well, there's certainly a few things on the go by the sound of it, and thank you for taking the time to write to us. Keep us posted in terms of once the move happens and what you buy. And that whole working from home dynamic for a couple, it's an interesting one. No wonder Tracy and Damon need a house, because if that is you and you are doing that with your partner, how have you set all of that up? I would imagine that you're going to need 2 office spaces, preferably away from each other. And the more that it looks and feels like an office, probably the better. That way you can adapt more quickly. But let us know if that is going on. Our email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. And because it is a Saturday morning, it's time to catch up with Anthony Landau, the Managing Director from Equilibria Finance. And also joining us this morning is Ashley Merlo, a Director of the Property Collab on the northern beaches of Sydney, to look at what's happening in this part of the world. Ashley, what about that? Do you reckon you'd need 2 very distinctly different workspaces if you were working in the same house as a partner?
Absolutely. Firstly, thanks so much for having me on today. And I couldn't agree more. 2 working spaces is definitely needed. I was there with my husband only a few years ago. And yes, 100%. Those dedicated workspaces will do the world of good.
What about you, Anthony?
Yeah, g'day, Craig. Great to be here again, mate. Yeah, look, I echo Ashley's sentiments that you definitely want those separate work areas, and I think we're probably seeing a shift in the sort of properties people are looking at as well, where they're looking at properties where it's able to facilitate working from home.
Yeah, I thought that was definitely worthwhile mentioning. Now, investing in property, it is a key strategy for wealth accumulation for many families, often leveraging gearing, of course, to enter the property market. Interesting stat here, currently over 30% of Australia's approximately 11 million private residential dwellings are classified as property investments. And Ashley, with the rental market evolving rapidly over the last 12 to 18 months, what trends are you noticing among investors, and what challenges are existing landlords facing at the moment?
Over the last 12 to 18 months, I guess if I was to look at investment properties as a whole or investors as a whole, there's generally a couple of different types of investors. We've had those investors that have purchased over the last couple of years, and naturally with the interest rate rises over the last 12 to 18 months, we are seeing that those clients are really starting to feel the pinch. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got our investor clients that have owned and held their property for a very long time. And whilst they're not necessarily feeling the cash flow, I guess, tightening like we are with our investor finance clients.
And Anthony, you've got some comments as well.
One of the biggest things for landlords is the growth in rentals. It's been up 8.8% in Sydney over the last 12 months, a slowdown from growth of 14.5%. We are starting to see some rental supply loosening up a little bit. In Sydney, metro vacancies at about 1.65%, up from about 0.5%, which is incredibly tight. So for renters, it's starting to ease up a little bit, but we're still seeing some pretty strong rental growth for the landlords as well.
You both, of course, are working closely with investors on the northern beaches. Anthony, what are the main obstacles new investors encounter when entering the market at the moment where we are?
I guess probably one of the biggest challenges for newer investors, whether they bought in the last 12 months or whether they're looking at purchasing at the moment, is managing the cash flow, is understanding the costs of getting into the market. The costs of getting into the market are obviously the costs of finance. We've got higher interest rates at the moment, but there's other costs of getting in. You've got stamp duty, you've got agency fees, you've then got costs of ongoing maintenance. So a lot of newer investors are not doing their cash flow modelling. They're looking at the asset class, they're seeing the growth over time, but one of the key challenges we're seeing is making sure people understand the costs to, number one, enter the market, number two, hold your property, because most properties at the moment, even though we've had that strong rental growth, are actually negatively geared, where the costs to run the property are more than the income that's being generated.
All right, and it is a Saturday morning, plenty of real estate going on right across the country this weekend, and it's always great to have plenty of input when it comes to investors, when it comes to mortgages. We'll come back after this and talk more.
Unlock the secrets of real estate and stay informed about the latest real estate buzz with hot market trends, emerging suburbs, and hidden gems. Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Saturday. With us is Anthony Landau, and we've also got Ashley. And firstly, coming back to you, Anthony, what are some of the key tips this morning and potential pitfalls for people to be aware of when building this property portfolio, which so many have been doing, especially over the last 3 years?
I think one of the key things is what I touched on before, is understanding your cash flow. That puts you in a position of being informed and understanding what it might cost to hold the property. One of the other key challenges in building a portfolio is obviously your deposit. And one of the beauties of investing in property is you can use leverage. You can use your existing home to borrow against, particularly with the growth we've had in the market, to leverage into the property. You can essentially use the equity in your existing owner-occupier home or an existing investment property to leverage into another property. Critical to that is your valuation. Critical to that, again, is understanding if you're using leverage, if you're using existing equity to buy a property, you might be borrowing 100% or 105% of the investment property you're looking to buy. You're maximising your gearing, but again, it comes back to making sure you're managing your cash flow. So one of the traps is people not doing their homework on cash flow and also taking the emotion out of it. An investment is very much that. It's an investment around income on the way through and capital growth, as distinct from an emotional decision about a property you're going to live in.
Yes, you've got to do that due diligence around cash flow. That is a very good point. Let's come to you, Ashley, because we want to talk about the importance of having a strong team and what qualities should investors look for in a property manager, do you think, to maximise their return on their investment? Such a big question.
Absolutely. That's a really important question and one that needs thoughtful consideration. When it comes to selecting a property manager, there are a number of things to look at, but experience is incredibly important. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen some massive shifts in the investor rental market on the northern beaches, and making sure that the property manager that represents you understands all of the different micro markets is incredibly important. We're seeing lots of investors with properties that have sat on the market for longer than they need to, which, those vacancy periods are costing investors money. And also when it comes to selecting the right agent to represent you, making sure that you're keeping that property to staff ratio low so your property can get the attention to detail that it requires. But then also on a professional standpoint, we work really closely with people like Anthony, also buyer's agents, to make sure that we are leveraging our clients' returns on investment. And one of the things that, recently I've got a bit of a case study where we're able to save our clients almost $10,000 per year just by undertaking a full health check on their investment property. So working with a property manager and those professional partners collaboratively is something really important to leverage an investor's return.
And just in terms of the whole property management scenario, of course, Sydney is so big. You do have these property management companies that are right over the other side of Sydney, and you were talking about that whole macro managing, and I guess that comes down to knowledge as well. Is that a bit of an issue where somebody is so far away from that area and they're sort of saying, yep, we can look after your property, no problems?
Yeah, look, when it comes to geographic location, we are really particular with the properties that we do manage. I guess from a business level, from my perspective as the business owner, we don't take on all clients. It needs to make financial sense for our business, but also to make sure that we're able to give the client the attention to detail that the property requires. So I think it's a really fine balance. Geographic location is something really important to be able to understand those micro markets. But personally, I think it comes down to time. Across the Northern Beaches, we're seeing really high property to staff ratios, which means that property managers are generally under the pump and they're not able to give clients the time that a property requires, especially when it's on the market for lease. We're coming at the back end now of a traditional winter market on the Northern Beaches. And when you've got a property specifically on the market for lease, you need to be really quite strategic with how that campaign is run and that level of inquiry is managed. And that can be detrimental to an investor if it's not done.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there, Ashley. Thank you for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning, along with Anthony, our guru in the mortgage space.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It was great to spend some time with you this morning.
And yeah, thanks, Craig. Great to be here again, mate. Have a great weekend, everyone.
We don't just report on real estate news. We take you to the source of the information. We produce more property podcasts every week than anyone else. We are your trusted guide for all things real estate.
Look, at the end of the day, we sort of looked at it and went, what's worth more? 18 stories with an approval or 21-story application? We'll take the approval any day of the week.
The general consensus from the broader community is in favour of it, and I do truly believe it'll pave the way for better investment and more quality development going forward.
And in terms of jobs, this is pretty significant. 1,100 jobs locally during the construction and around 350 ongoing positions once the hotel opens.
Look, it shows that Hervey Bay's in business. There's a lot of youth that actually leave the area because there are no jobs and they're looking for jobs. So hopefully this is the start of many more developments, not necessarily hotel developments, but just investment into the town that will ease that and will allow the youth to prosper and stay in town.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the Property Podcast that keeps you informed. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.